I'll never forget the look on his face. The shock, the disbelief, the way his mouth hung open just slightly, his hand frozen halfway to the glass of whiskey he'd been nursing all evening. There I was on his television screen, standing in front of the city's most prestigious innovation center, microphones pointed at me from every direction, cameras flashing like lightning in a storm. The banner beneath my face read, Dr. Sarah Chen, CEO of Meditech Solutions, named Innovator of the Year. And somewhere, in that pathetic apartment he could barely afford anymore, my ex-husband was watching everything he said I'd never become. You see, 18 months ago, that same man looked me dead in the eyes and said something I'll carry with me forever. Not because it broke me, though it tried to, but because it became the fuel that turned my entire life around. He said, "You'll be nothing without me. Absolutely nothing. You don't have the brains, the strength, or the courage to survive on your own. I made you, and without me, you'll disappear into the pathetic little nobody you've always been." Those words were supposed to destroy me. Instead, they rebuilt me into someone he could never touch again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you about that night, about watching him watch me succeed beyond his worst nightmares, I need to take you back. Back to where it all started. Back to when I actually believed I was lucky to have him. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because this story, this journey from broken housewife to the woman on the 10 o'clock news, it's going to show you exactly what happens when someone underestimates you. And trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how the man who tried to make me small got a front row seat to watching me become extraordinary. Let me paint you a picture of who I used to be, because honestly, looking back now, I barely recognize that woman. Her name was Sarah too, but she was a shadow, a whisper, a person who had slowly, painfully, systematically had every ounce of herself drained away until there was almost nothing left. I met Marcus when I was 24. I just finished my master's degree in biomedical engineering, was working at a research facility, and had my whole life mapped out ahead of me. I was ambitious, driven. I had dreams that kept me up at night, the good kind of dreams, the ones that make your heart race with possibility. I was working on revolutionary medical device technology, putting in 80-hour weeks, surviving on coffee and pure determination. Marcus was different from anyone I'd ever met. He was older, 32, confident in a way that made everyone in the room turn and look when he spoke. He was a financial consultant, wore expensive suits, drove a BMW, and when he walked into our research facility for a funding meeting, he locked eyes with me across the conference room and smiled like he'd just found exactly what he'd been searching for. The attention was intoxicating. Here was this successful, polished man, and he wanted me. Not just wanted me, but pursued me like I was the only woman in the world. Flowers at my desk. Surprise lunch deliveries during my long lab sessions. Text messages that made me blush. Within 3 months, we were inseparable. Within 6, he proposed. Within a year, we were married. Everyone said I was so lucky. My mother actually cried with joy. "Sarah, you found someone who'll take care of you," she'd said, like I was some fragile thing that needed protecting. My colleagues were impressed. My friends were envious. And me, I thought I'd won the lottery. The wedding was beautiful. Everything I'd dreamed of, except it wasn't really, was it? Because when I look back at the planning, I realize something I was too blind to see then. Every decision Marcus made seemed thoughtful, seemed loving, but was actually about control. I wanted a small wedding, intimate, just close friends and family. He insisted on 200 guests because a woman like you deserves to be celebrated properly. It sounded romantic, but those 200 guests, they were 90% his connections, his colleagues, his family, his friends. My small circle of grad school friends and lab partners were squeezed into 3 tables at the back. I wanted to honeymoon in Costa Rica, to see the rainforests and do research on tropical medicine applications. He booked Paris without asking because every woman wants Paris, Sarah. Don't be difficult. When I protested, he looked at me with those disappointed eyes and said, "I'm trying to give you the world and you're complaining. Do you know how that makes me feel?" So I apologized. I actually apologized for having preferences. That became the pattern. Slowly, so slowly I didn't notice it happening, my voice got quieter. My opinions mattered less. My dreams started to feel silly, childish, unrealistic. 6 months into our marriage, I got an incredible opportunity. A chance to lead a research team developing a portable diagnostic device for under-resourced communities. It was everything I'd worked toward. The position would mean longer hours, some travel, but it was my dream. Marcus listened to me gush about it over dinner, watched me gesture excitedly with my hands the way I always did when I was passionate about something. And when I finished, breathless and glowing, he reached across the table, took my hand, and said something that should have been my first real warning. "Sarah, honey, that sounds wonderful. Really, but have you thought about us? About our future? We've been talking about starting a family. This position would consume you. Is that really what you want? To choose a career over children, over me?" The way he said it made me feel selfish, greedy, like wanting professional success meant I didn't love him enough. So I turned down the position. I told my supervisor I needed to focus on family planning, and I watched the disappointment flicker across her face before she professionally wished me well. Marcus was so proud of me that night. He told me I'd made the right choice, the mature choice. He made love to me gently and whispered that I was his perfect wife, and I fell asleep feeling like maybe he was right. Maybe I was being selfish. But we never actually tried for a baby. Every time I brought it up, he had a reason to wait. Not the right time financially, too much stress at his job. Let's wait until next year. And somehow, next year never came. Instead, something else happened. He started criticizing, small things at first. "Are you really wearing that to dinner? It's a bit frumpy, don't you think? Or maybe you should go easy on the bread, honey. You've put on a few pounds." Comments disguised as concern, as helpfulness, as love. My work became a target too. I'd come home excited about a breakthrough, and he'd half listen while scrolling through his phone, then say something like, "That's nice, dear," in the same tone you'd use with a child showing you a crayon drawing. When I'd get frustrated, he'd flip it. "Why are you so sensitive? I'm listening. You just talk about work constantly, Sarah. It's exhausting. Not everything is about your little lab projects." Little lab projects. That's what he called research that could save lives. My friends started to fade away too. Not because I wanted them to, but because every time I made plans, Marcus made it difficult. He'd schedule something on the same night and be hurt when I chose my friends. Or he'd be cold and withdrawn when I came home from a girls' night, making me pay for the abandonment with days of silent treatment. It was easier to just stay home, to be available, to be the wife he wanted. I stopped going to professional conferences, stopped publishing papers, stopped reaching for anything beyond the safe, small existence Marcus was comfortable with. And the worst part, I told myself this was what marriage looked like: compromise, sacrifice, putting your partner first. I'd shrunk myself down so small I was practically invisible. At work, I took on less responsibility. At home, I became a ghost who cooked his favorite meals, kept the house immaculate, and asked nothing for myself. I wore the clothes he approved of, styled my hair the way he preferred, laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny, especially when they were at my expense. His friends thought he was hilarious when he'd mock me at dinner parties. "Sarah's adorable, isn't she? Still thinks her little science experiments are going to change the world. I keep telling her to leave the real innovation to the professionals, but she's stubborn." Everyone would laugh while I smiled and pretended it didn't feel like a knife between my ribs. 3 years into our marriage, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. I'd stopped wearing makeup because he said I looked better natural, which really meant he didn't want other men looking at me. I dressed in oversized clothes because he made comments anytime I wore something fitted. I'd gained 20 pounds from stress and emotional eating, which gave him endless ammunition for his concerned comments about my health. My career had flatlined. I was still at the same research facility, but I'd been passed over for promotion twice. My supervisor had stopped giving me significant projects because I'd become unreliable, always leaving early because Marcus needed me home, always declining opportunities because my husband didn't think they were appropriate. I was suffocating, and I didn't even realize I couldn't breathe. Then came the moment that changed everything. The moment the carefully constructed prison Marcus had built around me finally became visible. And ironically, it wasn't even about me. It was a Tuesday evening in March. Cold, drizzling rain, the kind of miserable weather that makes you want to curl up with tea and a book. I'd made Marcus's favorite dinner, pot roast with roasted vegetables, even though I'd had a brutal day at work dealing with a contaminated sample that had ruined 2 weeks of research. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and when Marcus came home, I made the mistake of trying to talk to him about it. Really talk, the way I imagined married couples were supposed to. "The Peterson project is completely derailed," I said, setting his plate in front of him. "We have to start the entire cellular analysis over. It's so frustrating because if we just had better quality control measures in place, this never would have happened. I actually have some ideas about—" "Sarah," he cut me off without even looking up from his phone. "Can we not do this right now? I've had a long day. I don't need to hear about your little work drama." Something in his tone hit me wrong. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was 3 years of swallowing my words finally catching up to me, but I pushed back just a little. "It's not drama, Marcus. It's my career. This project is important, and I just thought—" "Your career?" He looked up then, and the expression on his face was almost amused, like I'd said something charmingly naive. "Sarah, let's be honest. You have a job. A mediocre job at a second-rate research facility where you're essentially a lab assistant with a fancy degree. That's not a career. That's something you do to feel important." The words hit me like a slap. I stood there, frozen, the serving spoon still in my hand. "That's not fair," I whispered. "I've worked hard. I have a master's degree. I've published research. I—" "Published what? 2 papers, 3, 5 years ago?" He set his phone down, giving me his full attention now, and somehow that was worse. "Baby, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm being realistic. You're not exceptional at what you do. You're average, and that's okay. Not everyone can be special. You have other qualities." My throat felt tight. "What qualities?" "You're a good wife. You take care of me. You're sweet, loyal. That's valuable." He said it like he was comforting me, like he was being kind. "I could be more," I heard myself say. "If I'd taken that research team position, if I'd—" "Oh, here we go." He rolled his eyes, actually rolled his eyes at me. "Still crying about that position from 3 years ago. Sarah, you didn't get that because you weren't good enough. I saved you from embarrassing yourself. You would have failed, and then what? You'd have been fired, humiliated, and we'd be dealing with that mess. I protected you." "You didn't protect me. You talked me out of it. You made me feel guilty for even wanting it." His face changed then. The mask of patience slipped, and underneath was something cold, something mean. "I didn't make you do anything. You chose. You chose because deep down you knew the truth. You're not leadership material. You're not innovative. You're not special, Sarah. You're ordinary. And the sooner you accept that and stop reaching for things beyond your capability, the happier you'll be." Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and shameful. "Why are you being so cruel?" "I'm being honest." He stood up, abandoning the dinner I'd spent 2 hours preparing. "Honestly, I'm tired of tiptoeing around your fragile ego. You want to be coddled and told you're brilliant when you're not. You're a B- student who got lucky with some scholarships and now thinks she's going to change the world. It's delusional, and frankly, it's exhausting to watch." He started to walk away, toward his study, and I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was finally hearing out loud what he'd been saying in subtle ways for years. Maybe it was recognizing myself in his words, seeing how small I'd become. But something in me snapped. "I want a divorce." The words came out of my mouth before I even knew I was thinking them. They hung in the air between us, shocking us both. Marcus turned slowly. The look on his face was almost curious. "Excuse me." "I want a divorce," I repeated, and this time my voice was stronger. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who thinks so little of me." For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then he laughed. Actually laughed, this short, sharp bark of amusement. "No, you don't." "Yes," I said, my whole body shaking. "I do." "Sarah," He walked back toward me, and his voice took on that patronizing tone, like he was explaining something to a confused child. "You're upset. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly. Go take a bath, calm down, and we'll forget you said this." "I'm not forgetting anything. I mean it, Marcus. I want out." His expression hardened. "Really? You want out? Okay, let's talk about what that looks like. You leave me and then what? You think you're going to make it on your own? On your pathetic salary? In your pathetic job? You can barely handle life with me supporting you, managing you, keeping you on track." "I'll figure it out." "You'll fail." He said it with such certainty, such conviction. "You'll be nothing without me. Absolutely nothing. You don't have the brains, the strength, or the courage to survive on your own. I made you, Sarah. Everything you have, everything you are, is because I've propped you up, tolerated your mediocrity, made excuses for your shortcomings. Without me, you'll disappear into the pathetic little nobody you've always been." There it was, the sentence that would haunt him, the words that would become my battle cry. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for the first time in years. He wasn't confident. He was controlling. He wasn't protective. He was manipulative. He wasn't loving. He was cruel. And I wasn't weak. I was just beaten down. But beaten down and broken are two different things. "We'll see," I whispered. He smirked. "Yes, we will." That night, I packed a bag while he locked himself in his study. I didn't take much, just clothes and essentials. I left behind the jewelry he'd given me, the expensive things he'd bought to dress up his perfect wife. I didn't want any of it. I stayed with my friend Rachel, who I hadn't seen in over a year because Marcus had slowly iced her out of my life. She opened her door at 11 at night, took one look at my tear-stained face, and pulled me inside without asking a single question. The next morning, I woke up on her couch and realized something terrifying. I had no idea who I was anymore. I'd spent 3 years becoming whoever Marcus wanted me to be, and now I was just empty, a blank space where a person used to be. I called in sick to work. Then I called a divorce attorney. Then I sat in Rachel's bathroom and cried until I had nothing left. But somewhere in the deepest part of me, underneath all the pain and fear and shame, something else was stirring. Something Marcus had tried to kill but couldn't quite destroy. Rage. Pure, burning, clarifying rage. He thought I was nothing. He said I'd disappear. He believed, truly believed, that I was too weak, too stupid, too ordinary to survive without him. And in that moment, sitting on the cold tile floor of my best friend's bathroom, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to prove him wrong. Not just prove him wrong, but make him watch, make him see, make him choke on every single word he'd ever used to cut me down. I didn't know how yet. I didn't have a plan. All I had was anger and determination and the memory of his smirk when he told me I'd be nothing. But sometimes, that's all you need to start. Sometimes, that's enough to build an empire on. The divorce process was brutal, not because Marcus fought for me, tried to win me back, or showed any remorse. No, it was brutal because he did exactly what I should have expected. He made it as painful and humiliating as possible. He contested everything. The apartment we'd shared, even though his name was the only one on the lease. The furniture I'd picked out and paid for with my own money. He even tried to claim that my car, which I'd owned before we ever met, was somehow a marital asset he deserved half of. His lawyer was expensive, aggressive, and clearly operating under instructions to make me suffer. My lawyer was someone I could barely afford, a kind woman named Patricia who worked out of a cramped office above a dry cleaner and took payment plans because she could see I was drowning. Every court date, Marcus showed up in his designer suits, looking polished and successful and completely unbothered. He'd glance at me with this mixture of pity and disdain, like I was a homeless person who'd wandered into the courthouse by mistake. And I'd sit there in my off-rack dress from Target, feeling exactly as small as he wanted me to feel. The worst part was the financial reality. I'd been so dependent on Marcus's income that I hadn't even realized how little I made. My salary at the research facility was barely $42,000 a year. In our city, that was nothing. That was poverty wages for someone with my education. Marcus had paid for our upscale apartment, the nice dinners, the vacations, the lifestyle I'd grown accustomed to. Without him, I could afford basically nothing. Rachel was letting me stay with her rent-free, but I couldn't do that forever. She had her own life, her own small apartment. I was sleeping on a couch that made my back ache and trying to rebuild my entire existence from scratch. I'd look at apartment listings and want to cry. Studios in dangerous neighborhoods for $1,200 a month. Shared rooms with strangers. Places with mold and broken windows and landlords who looked at me like fresh prey. Work became a special kind of torture, too. I thought keeping my job would give me stability, something solid to hold on to while everything else fell apart. But I'd underestimated how much Marcus had poisoned that well, too. See, Marcus had done consulting work for our research facility. He had connections with our board members, played golf with our director. And apparently, during our divorce proceedings, he'd mentioned to a few key people that I was going through some personal instability and that he was concerned about my mental state. I started getting side-eyed in meetings. My supervisor, Dr. Harrison, called me into her office 2 weeks after I'd filed for divorce and asked if I was capable of maintaining professional standards during this difficult time. The implication was clear. I was damaged goods. I was a liability. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I'd been maintaining professional standards while emotionally abused for 3 years, so I thought I could handle a divorce just fine. But I needed this job. I needed the health insurance, the paycheck, the routine. So I smiled and assured her I was perfectly fine and nothing would affect my work. But something had affected my work. Me. I'd become so diminished, so risk-averse, so scared of taking up space that I was basically invisible. I did my tasks, followed protocols, and contributed nothing innovative. No wonder they saw me as mediocre. I'd been performing mediocrity for 3 years because excellence attracted attention, and attention from anyone other than Marcus was dangerous. 1 month after leaving Marcus, I hit what I can only describe as rock bottom. I was sitting in Rachel's apartment on a Friday night, eating ramen noodles for the 3rd time that week because I was trying to save every penny for a security deposit on my own place. Rachel was out on a date with her boyfriend, living her normal life, and I was alone with my failure. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I knew who it was. Marcus had been texting from different numbers because I'd blocked him. Saw you're still at the same job, still the same Sarah. Told you, you're nothing without me. You'll realize eventually and come back. I'll be waiting, but not forever. I stared at that message for a long time, and something inside me just broke, but not in the way he wanted. It broke like a dam breaks, releasing all the pressure that had been building behind it. I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. And then I started screaming. Just screaming into the empty apartment, letting out every ounce of rage and pain and humiliation I'd been swallowing for years. When I finally stopped, my throat was raw and my face was soaked with tears. But something had shifted, something fundamental. I walked to Rachel's bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Dull hair pulled into a limp ponytail. No makeup. Baggy clothes hiding my body like I was ashamed of it. Eyes that looked defeated before the fight even started. This wasn't me. This was Marcus's creation. His perfectly controlled, perfectly diminished wife. And she needed to die. I grabbed scissors from the drawer. Rachel's good hair-cutting scissors that she used for her side gig doing hair for friends. And I started cutting. I cut off inches of dead, damaged hair. I cut off the length Marcus had insisted I maintain because he liked long hair on women. I cut until I had a choppy, uneven bob that at least felt like rebellion. It looked terrible, absolutely terrible, but it was mine, my choice, my hair, my body, my life. I cleaned up the hair from the bathroom floor, and as I did, my mind started racing. Really racing, in a way it hadn't in years. Ideas flowing, connecting, building into something bigger. What did I actually want? Not what Marcus wanted. Not what I thought I should want. What did Sarah want? I wanted to matter. I wanted to do work that made a difference. I wanted to be respected for my mind. I wanted financial independence. I wanted to never, ever be at someone else's mercy again. And underneath all of that, I wanted Marcus to see it. I wanted him to watch me become everything he said I couldn't be. That was the seed of it, the beginning of the plan that would consume me for the next year and a half. I spent that entire weekend researching. I barely slept. I filled a notebook with ideas, strategies, possibilities. Rachel came home Saturday morning and found me surrounded by papers, laptop open, eyes wild. "Sarah, what happened to your hair?" she asked, starring. "I cut it. Listen, Rachel, I need to ask you something." I turned to face her, and whatever she saw in my expression made her sit down. "How much do you believe in me?" "What do you mean?" "Do you think I'm mediocre? Be honest." Rachel looked at me for a long moment. "I think you've been playing small for so long you've forgotten how big you actually are. The Sarah I met in grad school was the smartest person in every room. She was ambitious and fierce and brilliant. I've missed her." Something in my chest cracked open. I've missed her too. "So bring her back." "I'm going to do more than that," I said. "I'm going to become someone even she couldn't imagine." That Monday, I walked into Dr. Harrison's office and asked for a meeting. She looked surprised, but gestured for me to sit. "I want to talk about my career trajectory here," I said, and my voice didn't shake even though my hands did under the desk. "All right," she said cautiously. "I know I've been coasting. I know I haven't been producing at the level someone with my qualifications should be. That's going to change. I want to be considered for project leadership roles. I want to publish again. I want to contribute meaningfully to this facility's research goals." Dr. Harrison leaned back in her chair. "Sarah, that's good to hear. But I have to be honest, you've been passed over for promotions because you haven't demonstrated the initiative or innovation we need from our senior researchers. Talk is easy. What are you actually going to do differently?" It was a fair question, a hard question, and old Sarah would have wilted under it, made excuses, backed down. New Sarah opened her portfolio and slid 3 research proposals across the desk. "I'm going to do this," I said. Dr. Harrison picked up the first proposal and started reading. I watched her eyebrows rise. She picked up the second one, then the third. When she looked up at me, her expression had completely changed. "You wrote these this weekend?" "Yes." "This one, the portable diagnostic platform for cardiovascular markers. Sarah, this is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we've been looking for. Why haven't you brought ideas like this forward before?" "Because my husband told me they were stupid. Because I'd stopped believing I had anything valuable to contribute. Because I'd made myself small to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be." But I didn't say any of that. I just said, "I'm bringing them forward now." Dr. Harrison studied me, and I could see her recalculating, reassessing. "All right, I'll review these properly and get back to you by end of week. But Sarah, if you're serious about this, about rebuilding your reputation here, you need to know it's going to be an uphill battle. You've been coasting for years. People have opinions about your capabilities." "Let them have their opinions," I said. "I'll change them." I left her office feeling like I'd just jumped off a cliff. Terrified, exhilarated, completely uncertain if there was water below or rocks. But I jumped. That was what mattered. The next weeks were brutal in a completely different way than the divorce had been. I was working 12, 14-hour days. I'd get to the lab early, before anyone else arrived, and stay late after everyone left. I was relearning everything I'd let atrophy, catching up on 3 years of research I'd ignored, pushing myself harder than I'd ever pushed before. My first proposal got approved. Dr. Harrison gave me a small budget and a timeline to develop a prototype for the cardiovascular diagnostic device. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was a chance. I threw myself into it completely. I ran tests, failed, adjusted, failed again, adjusted again. There were nights I slept in the lab because I was too exhausted to drive home. Mornings where I woke up with my face pressed to research papers, coffee cold beside me. Rachel worried about me. "Sarah, you're going to burn out. You need to rest to take care of yourself." But she didn't understand. I couldn't rest, because every time I slowed down, I heard Marcus's voice. "You'll be nothing without me." Every time I wanted to quit, I saw his smirk. Every time I failed at something, I imagined him saying, "I told you so." The anger kept me going. The rage was fuel. But anger alone isn't enough to sustain you. I learned that the hard way about 3 months into my reinvention. I was working on a particularly difficult aspect of the diagnostic device, trying to make the blood analysis component both accurate and fast. I'd been at it for 16 hours straight, and I just couldn't make it work. The readings were inconsistent. The technology was failing. I finally lost it. I swept everything off my lab table in frustration. Vials, papers, equipment, everything crashed to the floor. And then I just stood there, shaking on the verge of tears. Rough day. I spun around. One of the other senior researchers, Dr. James Park, was standing in the doorway. I'd barely spoken to him in years, had actively avoided him actually, because Marcus had been weirdly jealous of him. "I'm fine," I said automatically, crouching to pick up the mess I'd made. "You're clearly not fine." He came in and started helping me gather scattered papers. "The cardiovascular diagnostic project, right? I heard Harrison gave you the green light." "Yeah, and I'm failing at it spectacularly." "What's the specific problem?" I almost brushed him off, almost said it was nothing, I'd figure it out. But something stopped me. Maybe exhaustion, maybe desperation. Maybe the realization that I'd been trying to do everything alone because asking for help felt like admitting weakness. So I told him. I explained the technical challenge, the inconsistent readings, the limitations of the current approach. James listened, really listened. Then he said, "Have you considered enzymatic amplification instead of direct measurement?" No, I didn't think that would work with portable technology. "There's new research out of Stanford. Here, let me show you." He pulled up a paper on my computer, and as I read, my mind started racing again. This could work. This could actually solve the problem. We ended up working together until 3 in the morning, redesigning the entire approach. And when we finally got a stable reading, I actually screamed with joy. James laughed. "There she is." "There who is?" "The Sarah Chen from grad school. The one who presented at conferences and made all of us feel like slackers. I've been wondering where she went." I felt tears prick my eyes. She got lost for a while. "Well, she's back now, and honestly, it's about time." That night was a turning point. Not just because I'd solved a major technical problem, but because I realized I didn't have to do this alone. I'd been so focused on proving I could survive without Marcus that I'd forgotten survival wasn't the goal. Living was. Thriving was. And that meant accepting help, building connections, being part of something bigger than my own revenge mission. I started collaborating more. I asked questions in team meetings. I offered help to junior researchers. I rebuilt professional relationships I'd let wither. And slowly, very slowly, people's perceptions of me started to change. I wasn't the checked-out researcher going through a messy divorce anymore. I was someone who showed up, contributed, pushed boundaries. 6 months after leaving Marcus, I got my first small victory. My cardiovascular diagnostic prototype worked. It actually worked. We tested it against standard lab equipment, and the accuracy was within acceptable margins. For a portable, low-cost device, it was revolutionary. Dr. Harrison called me into her office, and this time, she was smiling. "Sarah, I have to admit, I didn't think you had this in you. This prototype is impressive, really impressive. I'm recommending we move forward with development and start looking for commercialization partners." Commercialization. That meant patents. That meant potential profit sharing. That meant my name on something that could actually change healthcare. "Thank you," I managed to say. "Thank you for giving me the chance." "You gave yourself the chance. You did the work." She paused. "I'm also recommending you for promotion to senior research lead. It comes with a salary increase and your own team. Congratulations." I walked out of her office in a daze. A promotion, a salary increase, my own team. I was still broke. Still sleeping on Rachel's couch because I was pouring every extra penny into professional development courses and certification programs. Still eating more ramen than any human should consume. But I was climbing, I was moving up, I was becoming someone. I didn't text Marcus to tell him. I didn't post about it on social media. I didn't announce it to anyone except Rachel, who screamed and opened a bottle of cheap champagne we drank out of coffee mugs. Because this wasn't for him, not yet. This was just the foundation, the first floor of the building I was constructing. I wanted him to see the finished skyscraper. The promotion meant more money, which meant I could finally move out of Rachel's apartment. I found a tiny studio, barely 400 square feet, in a neighborhood that was up and coming, which really meant still kind of sketchy but gentrifying fast. It wasn't much. The kitchen was a hot plate and a mini fridge. The bathroom was so small I had to step out to change my mind. But it was mine. I'd signed the lease myself, paid the deposit with money I'd earned, bought furniture from IKEA that I assembled at 2 in the morning while my neighbors banged on the walls telling me to shut up. I stood in my tiny studio, surrounded by boxes, eating pizza straight from the box because I didn't own plates yet, and I felt richer than I'd ever felt in Marcus's luxury apartment. The work didn't stop. If anything, it intensified. As senior research lead, I had responsibilities I'd never handled before. Managing people, budgets, timelines, making decisions that affected entire project trajectories. I was terrified I'd fail. Terrified I'd prove Marcus right, that I wasn't leadership material, that I'd been promoted beyond my capabilities. So I worked harder than everyone. I was the first one in the lab every morning and the last one out every night. I took online courses in management and leadership. I read everything I could about running effective research teams. I made mistakes, lots of them, but I learned from each one. My team was small at first, just 3 junior researchers. They were young, hungry, brilliant in the way I used to be before I let someone dim my light. I saw myself in them, especially in a young woman named Priya who had ideas that spilled out faster than she could articulate them, who apologized constantly for taking up space, who flinched when anyone questioned her work. I pulled her aside one day after a meeting where she'd started to present an idea, then backed down when one of the older male researchers looked skeptical. "Priya, can I give you some advice?" She looked nervous. "Of course, Dr. Chen." "Stop apologizing for being smart. Stop making yourself smaller because someone else feels threatened. Your ideas are good. Your work is solid. Own that." Her eyes welled up. "It's just hard, when everyone treats you like you don't belong, like you're lucky to be here." "I know, believe me, I know exactly how that feels." I took a breath. "But here's what I learned. Their doubt about you is their problem, not yours. Your job isn't to make them comfortable with your brilliance. Your job is to be brilliant anyway." She nodded, and I saw something shift in her expression. The same shift I'd felt that night I cut my hair, that morning I walked into Dr. Harrison's office with my proposals. Watching my team grow and succeed became almost as satisfying as my own progress. We were building something together. The cardiovascular diagnostic device was advancing toward clinical trials, but we were also developing new projects, exploring new applications. I started getting invited to speak at conferences. Small ones at first, regional events where I presented our research to audiences of 50 or 60 people. But it felt monumental. I was on stage, my name in the program, my work being taken seriously. At one conference, about 8 months after my promotion, I ran into Dr. Ellen Morrison, the researcher who'd offered me that team leadership position 5 years ago, the one Marcus had talked me out of. She recognized me immediately. "Sarah Chen, I haven't seen you in years. How are you?" We grabbed coffee in the convention center, and I gave her the abbreviated version of my story. Left out the marriage, the abuse, the rock bottom. Just told her I'd taken some time to focus on family, then returned to research with renewed focus. She listened, then smiled. "I have to be honest, when you turned down that position, I was disappointed. I thought you had enormous potential. I'm glad to see you're fulfilling it now. Me too, I said. And then, because I needed to know, would that position still have been right for me back then? Absolutely, you would have been incredible. But you know what? Sometimes the timing isn't right. Sometimes we need to take a different path to end up where we're supposed to be. Her kindness nearly broke me, but it also crystallized something. I'd spent so much energy being angry at Marcus for what he'd stolen from me. The opportunities, the years, the confidence. But I was taking it all back. Not the same opportunities, not the same path, but something even better. Because I was building this with intention, with clarity, with a bone-deep understanding of exactly how precious it was. 9 months into my new role, our facility secured a major grant for medical innovation. And Dr. Harrison called me into her office with news that would change everything. Sarah, I'm sure you've heard about the grant. Yes, congratulations. It's huge for the facility. It is, and I want you to be the principal investigator. I stared at her. What? Your work on the cardiovascular diagnostic has put us on the map. Board members are impressed. Our funding partners are impressed. You've proven yourself as a researcher and a leader. This grant gives us $2 million to develop groundbreaking medical technology for underserved communities. I can't think of anyone better to lead it. $2 million. Principal investigator. This was the kind of opportunity people spent their entire careers working toward. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Build something extraordinary. Show everyone what I've suspected for a while now, that you're one of the best researchers in this field. I said yes. Of course I said yes. That night I sat in my tiny studio apartment, looking at the grant proposal, the budget spreadsheet, the timeline. This was real. This was happening. I thought about texting Marcus, about sending him a casual, just got named pie on a $2 million grant. How's your week going? But I didn't, because he still didn't deserve to know. He'd see eventually. When I was so high up, he'd need a telescope to spot me. The grant work consumed me for the next months. I built a team of 12 researchers. We developed 3 separate technology platforms. I was managing budgets, timelines, partnerships with medical facilities, relationships with community health organizations. I was working 16-hour days again, but this time it was different. This time I wasn't running from something. I was running toward something. My life became a blur of lab work, meetings, presentations, grant reports. I lost weight, not from stress, but from barely remembering to eat. I cut my hair shorter for convenience, got glasses to replace the contacts that irritated my eyes during long lab sessions. I looked different, moved different, spoke different. I'd grown into myself in a way I never had before. A year after my promotion, I presented our preliminary findings at a national conference. Not a regional one. National. 2,000 attendees, including some of the biggest names in biomedical research. I was terrified, absolutely terrified. The night before my presentation, I paced my hotel room, rehearsing, second-guessing every slide, every word. My phone rang. Rachel. Just calling to remind you that you're about to kill it tomorrow, she said. Or I'm about to humiliate myself in front of everyone who matters in my field. Sarah, listen to me. You've spent the last year and a half becoming someone extraordinary. Tomorrow, you just show them what I already know, that you're brilliant, you're innovative, and you belong on that stage. What if Marcus was right? What if I'm not actually? Stop. Marcus was a small, insecure man who needed you to be nothing so he could feel like something. He was never right about you. Not once. Not ever. I took a shaky breath. Okay. You've got this. I've got this. The next day, I walked onto that stage, looked out at 2,000 faces, and started talking about the work that had consumed my life for the past year, and something magical happened. I forgot to be afraid, because I knew this work inside and out. I'd lived it, breathed it, built it from nothing. And when you know something that deeply, when you believe in it that completely, the words just flow. I presented for 45 minutes, showed our data, our prototypes. our preliminary results from community health partnerships, explained how our technology could revolutionize diagnostic care in under-resourced areas. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the room erupted in applause, standing ovation. People actually stood up for me. The questions afterward were intense but respectful. Other researchers wanted to collaborate. Journalists wanted interviews. A venture capitalist handed me her card and said, "Call me. I want to fund whatever you do next." I walked off that stage feeling like I was floating. Like I'd just proven something fundamental, not to the audience, but to myself. I could do this. I was doing this. I was already someone Marcus could never have imagined. But I wasn't done, not even close. Because the real victory wasn't becoming successful. It was becoming so successful that it would be impossible for him to ignore. So visible that he'd have to see. So undeniable that every word he'd ever said to diminish me would choke him. And that moment was coming, closer than I even realized. 3 months after that national conference, my life shifted into a gear I didn't even know existed. The venture capitalist who'd given me her card, a woman named Catherine Liu, actually followed up. She invited me to lunch at one of those restaurants where they don't list prices on the menu and everyone speaks in hushed, important tones. I almost didn't go. Imposter syndrome hit me hard that morning. I stood in front of my closet, looking at my limited selection of professional clothes, thinking about canceling. Who was I to be meeting with a Silicon Valley investor? I was still Sarah Chen from a second-rate research facility, still the woman eating ramen to save money, still someone who sometimes woke up in the middle of the night convinced this was all a dream and I'd wake up back in Marcus's apartment. But I went. I wore my best blazer, the one I'd splurged on from a consignment shop, and I walked into that restaurant like I belonged there. Catherine was brilliant, sharp, the kind of woman who saw through pretense immediately. We talked for 3 hours. She asked me questions that made me think deeper about my work than I'd ever thought before. Questions about scalability, market potential, global applications. At the end of lunch, she set down her wine glass and looked at me directly. "Sarah, I'm going to be blunt. Your research is exceptional. Your prototypes are game-changing. But trapped in an academic research facility, they're going to move at a glacial pace and reach a fraction of the people who need them. Have you ever considered starting your own company?" My own company, the word seemed absurd. I'm a researcher, not an entrepreneur. You're whatever you decide to be. I've been investing in biotech startups for 15 years. I know what makes a company successful, and it's not just the technology. It's the founder. Someone who believes so deeply in what they're building that failure isn't an option. Someone who's hungry, driven, willing to sacrifice everything to make it happen. She leaned forward. That's you. I can see it. I wouldn't even know where to start. That's what I'm for. I want to invest in you. $2 million to start, with provisions for Series A funding once you hit certain milestones. You take your technology, license it from the research facility or develop new applications, and we build a company that can actually change healthcare on a global scale. $2 million. From an investor who'd backed 3 companies that had gone public. I need time to think about it, I said, even though every cell in my body was screaming yes. Of course, but Sarah, let me tell you something. Opportunities like this don't come around often, and women in STEM get even fewer of them. I'm offering you this because I believe in what you're building. Don't let fear make you small again. Those last words hit like a punch. She didn't know my story, didn't know about Marcus, but somehow she knew exactly what I needed to hear. I spent 2 weeks in agony, weighing the decision. Starting a company meant leaving the security of my job, the steady paycheck, the health insurance. It meant risking everything on myself. I talked to Rachel, who said, "Do it, absolutely do it." I talked to Dr. Harrison, who surprised me by being supportive. "Sarah, you've outgrown this facility, I can see it. You're meant for bigger things. If you do this, I'll help however I can." I talked to my team, especially Priya, who looked at me with shining eyes and said, "If you start a company, can I come with you?" But the conversation that mattered most was the one I had with myself. Late at night, sitting on the floor of my studio apartment, I asked myself the hard questions. What did I really want? Not revenge on Marcus, not anymore. That had been the fuel, but it couldn't be the destination. What did I want for myself? I wanted to build something that mattered. Something that would save lives, improve healthcare, make a dent in the world's suffering. I wanted to prove that a woman who'd been told she was nothing could become everything. I wanted to stand so tall that no one could ever make me feel small again. And I wanted to do it on my own terms, in my own company, with my own vision leading the way. I called Catherine the next morning. I'm in. The next 6 months were the most intense of my life. We incorporated Meditech Solutions in January. I licensed 2 of my diagnostic technologies from the research facility and began developing 3 more. Catherine helped me build a team, recruit talent, establish partnerships. Priya came with me, as did 2 other researchers from my old team. We hired engineers, developers, business development specialists. We rented lab space in a biotech incubator, working out of a cramped facility that smelled like disinfectant and ambition. I was the CEO, the actual CEO of an actual company. Some days I felt like I was playing dress-up, pretending to be someone important. Other days, I stepped so fully into the role it felt like I'd been preparing for it my entire life. We worked insane hours. There were weeks I slept in the lab more than I slept at home. We hit obstacles constantly, technical failures, regulatory hurdles, funding gaps. There were moments I was certain we'd fail, that I'd prove Marcus right after all, that I'd lose everything. But every time I wanted to quit, I'd remember why I started, and I'd push through. By month 4, we had working prototypes of 3 diagnostic devices. By month 6, we'd secured FDA approval for preliminary trials. By month 8, we had our first hospital partnership. The media started paying attention. First trade publications, then local news, then bigger outlets. A journalist from the city's major newspaper came to interview me about women in biotech. A local TV station did a segment on innovative startups changing healthcare. Catherine kept pushing me toward bigger visibility. You're not just building a company, Sarah. You're a story. The underdog, the woman in STEM, the researcher turned entrepreneur. That story matters. It inspires people. Don't run from the spotlight. But I was terrified of the spotlight. Terrified it would attract Marcus's attention before I was ready. Because as much as I'd grown, as much as I'd built, there was still a part of me that worried he'd find a way to tear it down. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in November, almost exactly 18 months after I'd walked out of Marcus's apartment. My assistant, a young guy named David who was fiercely protective of my time, knocked on my office door. Sarah, I have someone on the line who says it's urgent. Dr. Michelle Torres from the Mayor's Innovation Task Force. I took the call, expecting it to be about our hospital partnership or regulatory questions. Dr. Chen, I'll get straight to the point. Every year, the city recognizes innovators who are making significant contributions to public health and technology. This year, we'd like to honor you as Innovator of the Year. I sat down hard. I'm sorry, what? Innovator of the Year. Your work with Meditech Solutions, your diagnostic technologies, your commitment to healthcare equity. It's exactly the kind of innovation we want to celebrate and support. The award comes with a grant, media recognition, and it's presented at the Mayor's Innovation Gala. I'm honored, truly, but there must be people more deserving. Dr. Chen, you've developed technology that's going to provide diagnostic care to communities that have never had access before. You've created jobs, attracted investment to our city, and you've done it all in less than a year. You deserve this recognition. I accepted because Catherine would have killed me if I didn't, but the moment I hung up, panic set in. The Innovation Gala was a major event. Press coverage, television cameras, the kind of visibility I'd been avoiding because I wasn't ready, because I was scared, because some small part of me was still that woman Marcus had convinced was ordinary. Catherine was thrilled when I told her, "This is huge, Sarah. This is the kind of platform most startups would kill for. We need to maximize every second of this. The gala was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to prepare my acceptance speech, coordinate with the PR team Catherine insisted I hire, find something to wear that didn't come from a consignment shop. The night before the gala, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, a real bed now, in a real one-bedroom apartment I could actually afford, and thought about the journey that had brought me here. 18 months ago, I was nothing. No, that's not right. 18 months ago, Marcus had convinced me I was nothing, but I'd always been something. I'd just forgotten. Now I was a CEO, an innovator, someone about to be recognized by the city as a leader in my field. And Marcus had no idea. I'd successfully avoided him completely since the divorce finalized. He'd tried to reach out a few times those first months, texts from burner numbers, an email I'd deleted without reading. But I'd been ghost to him, invisible just like he'd predicted I'd be. Except I hadn't disappeared into nothing. I disappeared into everything. The gala was held at the Grand Hall downtown, a historic building with soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers. I arrived in a car service Catherine had insisted on, wearing a dress that actually fit me properly, my hair professionally styled, makeup done by someone who knew what they were doing. I looked in the mirror before stepping out of the car and barely recognized myself, not because I looked different, but because I looked like myself, confident, powerful, comfortable in my own skin in a way I'd never been even before Marcus. The event was massive. 500 guests, including the mayor, city council members, business leaders, journalists, cameras everywhere. A red carpet where they asked you to pose and smile and answer questions about your work. I was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. They presented my award third, after a tech entrepreneur and a sustainability innovator. When they called my name, I walked onto that stage in front of 500 people and more cameras than I could count, and I gave the speech I'd written and rewritten a dozen times. I talked about healthcare equity, about the communities we were serving, about the belief that everyone, regardless of income or location, deserved access to quality diagnostic care. I talked about the team that had made this possible, about the investors who'd believed in the vision. I didn't talk about Marcus, didn't mention the divorce, the rock bottom, the revenge that had motivated me. That wasn't the story anymore. This was the story, a woman who'd built something meaningful, who'd taken an idea and turned it into a company that was changing lives. The applause was thunderous, people stood, cameras flashed. And as I walked off that stage, holding the Crystal Award, I felt something release in my chest. I'd done it, not just succeeded, but transcended. I was no longer defined by what Marcus had done to me. I was defined by what I'd built in spite of him. The mayor pulled me aside after the ceremony. Dr. Chen, we'd love to feature you more prominently in the city's innovation initiatives. Would you be available for a press conference tomorrow? We're announcing a new public health partnership, and having you there would be powerful. I said yes, even though I was exhausted, even though I wanted to go home and process everything. The press conference was scheduled for 6 p.m. at the Innovation Center. I showed up in my CEO uniform, tailored blazer, minimal jewelry, the confidence I'd built over 18 months of clawing my way back from nothing. There were more reporters than I'd expected. Not just local outlets, but regional news, tech journalists, healthcare publications. They set me up at a podium with the mayor, other city officials, healthcare leaders. We talked about the new public-private partnership to bring diagnostic technology to underserved neighborhoods. My technology, my company, at the center of it. The questions came fast. About the technology, about Medi-Tech solutions, about my vision for healthcare innovation. I answered them clearly, confidently, like I'd been doing this my whole life. Then a reporter from Channel 7 asked, Dr. Chen, as a woman in a male-dominated field, what drives you? I paused, thought about the real answer, thought about Marcus's voice saying, you'll be nothing without me. I'm driven by the belief that we're all capable of more than we think we are, I said. That the only limits on what we can achieve are the ones we accept. And I refuse to accept limits anymore. More applause, More photos. The mayor's communications director pulled me aside after. That was perfect. We're going to push this story hard. You're exactly the kind of success story this city needs. Expect to see yourself on the news tonight. On the news. The 10 p.m. news, specifically, which was the most watched broadcast in the city. I went home, ordered takeout, and sat on my couch with my laptop, catching up on emails. I wasn't planning to watch myself on TV. It felt too surreal, too self-indulgent. But at 10 p.m., my phone started blowing up. Rachel calling, Catherine calling, Priya texting, "Oh my God, turn on Channel 7. I turned it on. And there I was, not a brief mention, not a quick clip, a full 4-minute segment. They showed footage from the gala, from the press conference, from our lab. They interviewed the mayor, who called me a visionary leader. They showed my diagnostic devices, explained how they worked, talked about the lives they'd save. The banner beneath my face read, Dr. Sarah Chen, CEO of Meditech Solutions, named Innovator of the Year. I looked powerful, competent, successful, everything Marcus had said I'd never be. And somewhere in this city, I knew he was watching. Because Marcus always watched the 10 p.m. news. It had been his routine, his sacred ritual. Every single night, 10 p.m., Channel 7, with his whiskey and his self-importance. I imagined him sitting there, in whatever apartment he could afford now, probably something less impressive than the one we'd shared. I imagined his hand freezing halfway to his glass. I imagined his face as he recognized me, as he realized what he was seeing. His ex-wife, the woman he'd told would be nothing, on the news, being celebrated as one of the city's most important innovators. My phone rang. Unknown number. Then another unknown number. Then a text from a number I didn't recognize but somehow knew was him. "Sarah, I saw the news. We need to talk." I stared at that message for a long time, felt the satisfaction curl through me like smoke. Then I deleted it without responding. Because he didn't deserve my words, didn't deserve my time, didn't deserve any piece of the person I'd become. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff, not the cheap bottle from the corner store, and I toasted the empty room. Here's to being nothing, Marcus. Absolutely nothing. The next morning, I woke up to my phone absolutely flooded. Emails, texts, missed calls. My company inbox had 200 new messages. My LinkedIn had blown up. Interview requests, partnership proposals, investment offers. And buried in all of it, 5 more messages from Marcus's various numbers. "Sarah, please, I just want to talk. I always knew you had potential. I'm proud of you. I made mistakes. Can we meet for coffee? You have to understand, I was going through a difficult time back then. I never meant those things I said. You know that." Each message was more desperate than the last. I read them all, felt nothing but a distant sort of pity, and blocked every single number. David knocked on my office door mid-morning. "Sarah, I have someone in the lobby saying he's your ex-husband and needs to see you urgently. Security is asking what you want them to do." Of course he'd shown up in person. Of course he couldn't take silence for an answer. "Tell security he's not authorized to be here. If he refuses to leave, they should call the police." David nodded and left. 10 minutes later, my office phone rang. It was security. "Dr. Chen, the gentleman is insisting he just needs 5 minutes. He's causing a bit of a scene." I felt a flash of the old fear. The old instinct to give in, to smooth things over, to make myself small so someone else could feel big. Then I remembered who I was now. I don't care if he causes a scene. I don't care if he stages a protest. He is not welcome here, he will not see me, and if he doesn't leave in the next 60 seconds, call the police and have him removed for trespassing. Understood, Dr. Chen. I hung up and went back to my emails. My hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline and old trauma mixing with new strength. 15 minutes later, David poked his head in again. "He left, but he said to give you this." A handwritten note on expensive stationery. Of course. I opened it. "Sarah, I know I hurt you. I know I said things I shouldn't have, but I've changed. Seeing you succeed made me realize how wrong I was about everything. You're extraordinary, you always were, and I was too insecure to see it. I threw away the best thing in my life because I was threatened by your potential. Please give me a chance to apologize properly. I'm not asking to get back together. I just need you to know that I'm sorry and that I'm in awe of what you've become. You proved me wrong about everything. Yem. I read it twice, looked for the manipulation, the guilt trip, the angle, and found it immediately. I'm not asking to get back together was a classic manipulation tactic. Plant the idea while claiming not to want it. I've changed without any evidence or accountability. I was threatened by your potential, making it about his insecurity rather than his abuse. This wasn't an apology. This was a man who'd seen his ex-wife on TV, realized she was successful, and wanted back into her orbit, either to benefit from it or to tear it down. Maybe both. I took out my phone and composed a text to the last number he'd used. Then I deleted it, because even a rejection was more attention than he deserved. Instead, I called my lawyer, Patricia, who'd helped me through the divorce on a payment plan and had cried with joy when she saw me on the news. Patricia, my ex-husband, is trying to contact me. Multiple messages showed up at my office. I need a cease and desist letter sent to him immediately. If he continues, I want a restraining order. Consider it done. Sarah, I'm so proud of you. Thank you for everything. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You did all the hard work. I just filed the paperwork. The cease and desist was delivered that afternoon. Marcus's attempts to contact me stopped immediately. Because of course they did. He was only brave when he had power. The moment I demonstrated I had more, he backed down. But the story wasn't over. Because 3 days later, I got a call from Rachel, her voice tight with anger. Sarah, you need to see this. Marcus is giving interviews. What? He's talking to reporters, positioning himself as your supportive ex-husband who encouraged your career. I just saw a quote in the business journal where he said, I always knew Sarah was destined for greatness. I'm just glad I could be part of her journey. I felt rage, pure and clean, flood through me. He was trying to attach himself to my success, trying to rewrite history, to make himself part of the narrative, to steal even a fraction of what I'd built. Send me the links, I said. I read through 3 different articles where Marcus had inserted himself into my story, telling reporters we'd had an amicable divorce and he was proud to see her thriving, implying he'd been supportive, encouraging, instrumental even. It was such blatant, obvious bullshit, but it was out there in print, in publications people would read. Catherine called me an hour later. Have you seen the Marcus situation? Unfortunately. We need to address this. He's trying to piggyback on your success, and worse, he's controlling the narrative. People are going to start believing he was some supportive partner in your journey unless you correct the record. I don't want to give him any more attention. I understand, but Sarah, your story is powerful. The real story. Woman escapes controlling marriage, rebuilds her life, creates groundbreaking company. That story inspires people. His version, where he's the supportive ex cheering you on, that's not just false. It's harmful. She was right. I knew she was right. What do you suggest? There's a reporter, Amy Chen from the Metropolitan, who wants to do a profile on you. She's tough but fair. Tell her the truth. Not for revenge, but for accuracy. For every woman who's been told she's nothing and needs to hear how you became everything. I thought about it for exactly 5 seconds. Set it up. The interview was scheduled for the following week. Amy Chen was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for asking hard questions, but telling stories that mattered. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. She set her recorder between us and smiled. Dr. Chen, thank you for sitting down with me. I want to talk about your journey and I want you to be honest, not the polished CEO version, the real version. So I told her everything. The controlling marriage, the systematic diminishment, the breaking point, the words Marcus had said that became my catalyst. I told her about rock bottom, about the climb, about building meditech solutions out of rage and determination and refused defeat. I told her about Marcus now, trying to rewrite history, trying to claim credit for success he'd actively tried to prevent. "What do you want people to know?" Amy asked at the end. "That nobody gets to define your worth except you. That the people who try to make you small do it because your bigness threatens them. And that success, real success, isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about proving yourself right." The article came out 2 weeks later, front page of the Metropolitan's Sunday edition. "From Nothing to Everything: How Dr. Sarah Chen Built a Healthcare Empire from the Ashes of an Abusive Marriage." It was honest, raw, powerful. Amy had captured everything: the pain, the resilience, the triumph. And it went viral. Within hours, it was being shared across social media. Women were commenting with their own stories, their own experiences with partners who tried to diminish them. News outlets were picking it up, asking for follow-up interviews. Marcus tried to do damage control, claiming he'd been misquoted in those earlier articles. But nobody cared. His narrative had been exposed as the fiction it was. My narrative, the true one, had taken its place. And that, finally, was the moment I let him go. Not with anger, not with vindication, but with simple, clear finality. He'd been my catalyst, but he wasn't my story. He was just a chapter I'd survived on my way to something bigger. That article changed things in ways I couldn't have predicted. The response was overwhelming, not just professionally, but personally. I received thousands of messages from women who'd lived versions of my story. Women still trapped in marriages where they were being made small. Women who'd left and were struggling to rebuild. Women who'd made it to the other side and wanted to share their own victories. I read every single message I could, responded to as many as possible, because I remembered what it felt like to think you were alone, to believe the voice in your head saying you weren't good enough was telling the truth. Meditech Solutions continued to grow. 6 months after the article, we closed our Series A funding round. $12 million. We expanded our team to 45 people, opened a second lab, began clinical trials in 3 countries. Our diagnostic devices were being used in community health centers across 8 states, providing care to people who'd never had access before. I was on the cover of Healthcare Innovation magazine. Got invited to speak at a TED conference. The governor appointed me to a statewide task force on healthcare equity. My calendar was booked 18 months out with speaking engagements, board meetings, investor pitches. But the success I'm most proud of isn't the funding or the recognition or even the technology, as much as those things matter. It's the culture we built at Meditech Solutions. A culture where people are encouraged to be brilliant, to take risks, to speak up. Where nobody gets made small for someone else's comfort. I watch Priya, who's now our director of research, present at team meetings with confidence that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. I see the way our team challenges each other respectfully, builds each other up, celebrates wins together, and problem solves through failures without blame or shame. That's the real victory. Creating a space where people can be their full selves, where talent isn't wasted because someone's too insecure to handle it. My personal life transformed too, though more quietly. I moved into a real apartment, a 2-bedroom with actual square footage and windows that let in light. I decorated it exactly how I wanted, with art I chose and furniture that made me happy. No one's opinion mattered but mine. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones. Started running in the mornings because I liked how it made me feel, not to lose weight or meet someone else's standard. Let my hair grow out again, but kept it shorter than Marcus had preferred, because I preferred it that way. I even started dating, cautiously. Nothing serious at first, just relearning how to interact with men as equals, as someone with power and agency. It was terrifying and awkward and sometimes wonderful. I made mistakes, went on terrible dates, had a few brief relationships that didn't work out. But I also learned what I actually wanted in a partner. Someone who celebrated my success instead of feeling threatened by it. Someone who saw my strength as an asset, not a challenge. Someone who wanted to build alongside me, not control or diminish me. I met Daniel about a year after the article came out. He was a physician working in underserved communities, one of our early partners testing our diagnostic devices. He was kind, brilliant, and when I told him about a breakthrough we'd had in the lab, his eyes lit up with genuine excitement. When I got invited to speak at a major conference, he offered to rearrange his schedule so he could be there to support me. It was such a small thing, but it made me cry, because I'd forgotten that partnerships could look like that. Two whole people choosing to support each other, not one person propping themselves up by tearing the other down. We've been together for 8 months now. He's met Rachel, who interrogated him thoroughly and gave her approval. He's been to company events and never once tried to position himself as anything other than my supportive partner. He tells people, "I'm here with Dr. Chen," with pride in his voice, no ego bruised by being the plus one. I'm not rushing into anything. I'm not making the same mistakes I made with Marcus, mistaking intensity for love, control for care. But for the first time in years, I'm allowing myself to believe that I can have both professional success and personal happiness, that wanting a relationship doesn't make me weak or dependent. As for Marcus, I haven't seen him in person since the divorce, but I know things about his life because, despite myself, I've kept peripheral awareness. Not obsessively, not stalking his social media, but the kind of passive knowledge you accumulate when you share a city and professional circles. His consulting business took a hit during the recession. He had to downsize, lay off staff. The last I heard, he was working for someone else's firm, no longer running his own practice. He's apparently dating someone, a woman 15 years younger who works in his office. I hope, genuinely, that he treats her better than he treated me, though I doubt he's capable. A few months ago, I ran into him, completely by accident, at a coffee shop downtown. I was there meeting with a potential board member, and Marcus was in line ahead of me. I saw him before he saw me, had a moment to decide how to react. Run, ignore him, confront him. But then he turned, and our eyes met, and I felt nothing. No anger, no fear, no satisfaction, just blank neutrality like looking at a stranger. He looked older, tired. The polish I'd once found so attractive seemed cheap now, like a knockoff version of success. "Sarah," he said, and I could hear him trying to decide what tone to take. Friendly, apologetic, casual. "Marcus," I replied, my voice even. You look great, really successful." "Thank you." An awkward pause. He was waiting for me to say something, to engage, to give him an opening. "I really am sorry," he said quietly, "for everything. I've thought about it a lot, what I did, how I treated you. You deserved better." I looked at him and realized this was probably true. He probably had thought about it. Probably did feel some version of remorse, especially now that he could see the magnitude of what he'd lost, what he'd tried to destroy. But his remorse wasn't my responsibility. His growth, his guilt, his regret, none of it was mine to absolve or acknowledge. "I hope you're doing well, Marcus," I said, and I meant it. Not because I cared particularly about his well-being, but because I'd moved so far beyond him that I could afford to be generous. I paid for my coffee and walked back to my table, where a former CEO of a Fortune 500 company was waiting to discuss joining Meditech's advisory board. I didn't look back to see Marcus's reaction. Didn't need to. That's the thing about true healing, true success. It's not about the other person watching. It's not about revenge or vindication or making them hurt the way they hurt you. It's about reaching a place where they simply don't matter anymore. Now, 2 years and 4 months after I walked out of that apartment, I'm sitting in my office, a real office with my name on the door and a view of the city, reflecting on everything that's happened. Everything I've built, everything I've become, everything I've learned. People ask me all the time how I did it, how I went from rock bottom to CEO in less than 2 years. They want a formula, a strategy, a step-by-step plan they can replicate. But the truth is messier than that. There was no master plan. There was just a choice I made every single day to keep moving forward, to do the work even when I was terrified, to believe in myself even when that belief felt delusional, to get up every time I fell down, and I fell down a lot. The truth is that anger got me started, but it couldn't sustain me. I had to find deeper fuel, purpose, passion. The genuine desire to build something meaningful. Revenge is a short-term motivator. It burns hot but burns out fast. You need something more sustainable to build a life on. The truth is that I had help. So much help. Rachel, who gave me a couch to sleep on and believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Patricia, my lawyer, who worked with me on payment plans and advocated fiercely for my interests. Dr. Harrison, who gave me a second chance when she had every reason not to. Catherine, who saw potential in me before I saw it in myself. Every mentor, colleague, team member who contributed to this journey. Nobody does this alone, and pretending you can is just another form of self-sabotage. The truth is that I'm still healing, still unpacking trauma, still working through moments where someone's tone or comment triggers that old fear, that old instinct to make myself smaller. I'm in therapy now, doing the real work of understanding how I ended up in that relationship, how I allowed myself to be diminished, how I can prevent it from happening again. Success doesn't erase trauma. It just gives you better resources to deal with it. But here's what I want you to understand, especially if you're listening to this and seeing yourself in my story. Whether you're in a relationship that's making you small, whether you're freshly out and terrified, whether you're months or years into rebuilding and wondering if it's worth it. You are not what someone else says you are. You are not their insults, their doubts, their diminishment. You are not their fear masquerading as concern. You are not their need for control disguised as love. You are capable of so much more than you think you are. So much more than anyone who's trying to keep you small wants you to believe. And if someone in your life is invested in making you feel less than, making you doubt yourself, making you believe you can't survive without them, that person is not protecting you. They're protecting themselves from the threat of your full potential. Leaving is terrifying. Rebuilding is exhausting. There will be moments you want to give up, moments you think maybe they were right, maybe you are nothing without them. But I promise you with everything I've learned and built and become, you are not nothing. You have never been nothing. You've just been convinced that you are by someone who needs you to believe it. Your worth is not determined by someone else's ability to see it. Marcus told me I'd be nothing without him, that I didn't have the brains, the strength, or the courage to survive on my own. He was wrong about all of it. I had the brains. I'd always had them. I'd just been convinced to hide them. I had the strength. It was just buried under years of being told I was weak. And the courage. I found that in the darkest moment, when I had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. But more than proving Marcus wrong, I proved myself right. I proved that the small voice inside me that said, "You're meant for more than this," was telling the truth. I proved that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. Meditech Solutions will probably go public in the next 18 months. If it does, I'll be one of the youngest female CEOs of a publicly traded biotech company. Our technology is already saving lives, and it's going to save thousands more. But that's not the part that matters most. The part that matters most is that I sleep peacefully at night, that I look in the mirror and recognize the woman looking back, that I make decisions based on what I want, what I believe, what serves my purpose, not based on fear of someone else's reaction. The part that matters most is that I'm free. So to everyone listening who's still trapped, still scared, still believing the lies someone told you about your worth, this is me, on the other side, telling you it's possible. The climb is hard, but the view from the top is worth every difficult step. And to anyone who's ever told someone else they'd be nothing without them, who's tried to control or diminish or destroy someone's spirit to prop up their own ego, we see you. We know what you're doing, and we're becoming everything anyway. Marcus said I'd be nothing without him. Instead, I became everything in spite of him. And that made all the difference.